Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome in. Welcome in. I want to share with you all a new series that I am doing called Through the Funder's Lens. And I decided to do this series because I really want to help organization understand what it is to be considered for funding from the side of those that are giving away grants, the major donors, and the like. Um, and so this is a series that I've created, and this is episode one. So I want to welcome you into episode one of Through the Funder's Lens. I'm Jennifer Yarbrough, and for over 40 years, I've had the privilege of working with nonprofit organizations, working in leadership, working as a fundraiser, working as a grant writer, helping thousands of organizations really strengthen their leadership, build organizational capacity, and to position themselves for sustainable funding. And during my 4 decades of work, I've noticed something that has completely changed the way I think about the nonprofit process. Most nonprofit leaders spend their time looking at their organization through the eyes of the founder, right? Um, you're looking at your organization through the lens or through the eyes of your passion, through the eyes of the work that you want to do, through possibly even your own personal experiences. But the funder, the foundations, the corporations, the major donors, the corporate partners, um, they're looking through an entirely different lens. And that difference is what determines often whether the organization receives funding or just gets passed over. And that's why I created this series. Every week, I'm wanting to go, I want to step into the role of the reviewer. All right. Not only am I a grant writer, but I'm also a grant reviewer. And so we're going to step into the role of a reviewer that when they're looking at the proposals, when they're reviewing the information from the organization, I want you to have an insight view, an idea of what it is that they're looking at. And I hope that this brings some clarity. All right. And this is not to criticize organizations or not to discourage founders, but to really understand what experienced funders are often evaluating long before they decide whether to invest. All right. Whether to make the donation or whether to make the contribution. So let's begin. All right. I'd like for you to imagine something. Tomorrow morning, your nonprofit receives an email. A private foundation is interested in your work, and they've invited your organization to submit a proposal for a $500,000 grant. What happens next? Most nonprofit leaders immediately would think, we need to write a we need to write a great proposal, right? And that's understandable. We need to write a great proposal. Maybe we need to hire a grant writer, right? That's understandable. But let me ask a different question. What if your proposal isn't the first thing that they're evaluating? I'm going to say that again. What if your proposal isn't the first thing they're evaluating? What if before they ever read your proposal, they're evaluating the organization behind it? That changes the conversation, doesn't it? When I got into the nonprofit space, I came into the nonprofit space after college. I was an intern, and that's how I, you know, developed my interest and my ability in grants, and went on to become the executive director of many organizations. And having had the opportunity through my career of helping thousands of organizations nationally and internationally. and working in these organizations, training these organizations, really understanding the the people behind the organizations. Initially, I believed what many nonprofit leaders still believe today, right? That if we could just secure funding, right? That was my job. And my job as a grant writer, my job as a fundraiser, my job was to secure funding, right? But as I grew in my career, um, I began to see something different. And I believe that this is a thought and a mindset that many people still have today, that if we could just secure funding, everything else will work itself out, right? If I could just get that grant, if I could just get, if we could just have a great event, if we could come up with a great campaign, if we could just find donors, and those things matter. But over time, as years went on, I noticed a pattern. Some organizations received funding, yet continued struggling. I'm going to say that again. I noticed a pattern. The organizations that received funding, they got the grant, they had the events, they had donors, yet they continued to struggle. While others attracted investments, the donors, the funders, the supporters, the contributors, year after year. And the difference wasn't always the mission. It wasn't always the grant writer either. And it certainly wasn't always the size of the organization. The difference was something much deeper. It was the strength of the organization itself. So today, I'd like you to do something you've probably never done before. I'd like you to stop thinking like a founder, like the person who started the nonprofit, like the person who has the passion for the program. Instead, I want you to think like someone deciding whether to invest or to donate or to contribute to your organization. You're responsible for protecting those donated dollars. You want those dollars to create lasting impact. So naturally, you're going to ask questions, right? Remember, you're putting yourself in the shoes, in the seat. You're looking at this through the lens of the funder, okay? And you're looking at it thinking you're responsible for protecting the dollars. You want those dollars to create lasting impact. So naturally, you're going to ask questions, right? If I were reviewing your organizations, here are some of the questions I'd begin asking. So, who governs this organization? Is the board engaged or simply listed on paper? How are major decisions made? Are financial systems in place that demonstrate responsible stewardship? Can leadership continue moving the mission forward if one person steps away? How are outcomes measured? Can this organization demonstrate impact or only activity? Right? Another question may be, is there a strategic plan? Is there evidence of long-term sustainability? Are you noticing something? Almost none of these questions begin with the grant proposal. They begin with the organization. Think about building a house. When guests arrive, they notice the kitchen, the furniture, they notice the landscaping. But before anyone moves in, an inspector looks somewhere else. The inspector looks at the foundation. Because no matter how beautiful the house appears, if the foundation is weak, everything built on top of it is at risk. Your nonprofit organization works exactly the same way. The mission is what people see, right? The furniture, the kitchen, the living room, the floors. But organizational capacity is what holds everything together. I believe that one of the biggest misconceptions that many nonprofit leaders have been taught is this: funding creates stronger organizations. I'm going to say that again. I believe that this is one of the biggest misconceptions that leaders have been taught, that funding creates stronger organizations. And after 40 years in this work, I believe something totally different. I believe something totally different. I believe that funding doesn't automatically strengthen the organization. Funding often magnifies whatever already exists. Strong organizations become stronger. Weak systems become more visible, right? That's why I believe capacity creates funding, not because capacity guarantees funding, but because organizations that intentionally build leadership, governance, accountability, operational strength are far better positioned to earn long-term trust. I'd like to leave you with one question. And if someone were to evaluate your organization today, would they only see your passion? Or would they also see an organization that's built on stewardship, um, built on, built to steward, right? Built to steward significant investment? Would they only see your passion? Or would they also see an organization that's built to steward significant investment? And that's an important difference. Your passion matters, your mission matters, but so does your organization's capacity. And that's why I created the organizational capacity assessment. Not to judge your organization, not to assign a label to the organization, but to help you evaluate your nonprofit through a different lens. I am convinced that what you are learning online, right? The saying that says, start a nonprofit, you can get a grant. And a lot of people are looking at their nonprofit through the lens of my 501c3. I have a 501c3. Where's my grant? I have a 501c3. I need donors. I have a 501c3. I need contributors. I have a 501c3. But it's not through the lens of the paperwork that your donors, your funders, and supporters are making a decision on who they're going to invest in. And so I created this organizational capacity assessment, and it is to help you evaluate your organization through a different lens. The assessment is designed to identify your organizational strengths and also uncover capacity gaps and help you understand what may need attention before your next major funding opportunity. If you've never looked at your organization this way, I encourage you to begin here. And I'm going to put the link below. All right. I'm going to go to my next episode. All right. So in my next episode, we're going to examine one of the most overlooked indicators of organizational readiness. A lot of people think that, Jen, I have my paperwork, I'm ready, right? I'm ready to fundraise. I'm ready to get grants. I'm ready to raise money. And through the lens of the funder, the paperwork is not what makes you ready to receive a grant. All right. I want you to examine your own organization. Would your board inspire confidence in a major funder? I think that answer may surprise you. And I hope you'll join me as I embark on this series and hopefully bring some light, some encouragement, some education, and some important information that you not just hear, but you can implement. All right. Before you apply for another grant, before you ask another donor, before you plan another fundraising event, I want you to take a moment and look at your organization through the funder's lens because your mission deserves an organization that's strong enough to protect it. After 40 years of nonprofit leadership, I've become convinced of one truth. Funding doesn't create capacity. Capacity creates funding. I'm Jennifer Yarbrough. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.